All right, so our next topic up is going to be demystifying AI, small business applications. I'm going to ask Parker. Parker, again, is one of our senior researchers here at the SMART Centre. He holds an honors bachelor's degree in physical science and a system analyst advanced diploma. Parker's expertise is working in real-time digital technologies. He has developed numerous VR, AR, and prototype applications for both creative industries or creative endeavors and solving unique business challenges. He also works frequently with machine learning and AI tools through the development of novel software integrations, such as generative character animation for creative industries. Welcome, Parker.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here. So yeah, I'm Parker, as mentioned, one of the senior researchers at the SMART Centre. So I've worked quite a bit. Is there a remote here? Oh, thank you. So yeah, I work a lot on projects related to machine learning, especially recently. As you can figure, AI is a big topic nowadays. Everyone's invested in it. Everyone wants their company to be invested in it. My time in research, I've been in research for quite a while, previously at a different college. And throughout my time in software development research, definitely started seeing first a lot of the first approaches for machine learning AI, which was people looking at things numerically. How can I better manage my data? How can I better look at trends for my information I'm working with and get insights that's going to benefit my business? And of course, over the last few years, we've seen that transition more into large language models, using things like ChatGPT and the like, to instead of asking for specifically trends, asking for more specific subjective information to help augment whatever solution it may be. Or maybe in the case of real world applications, looking at things like chatbots. So with that, I think large language models have really taken control of the domain. When people think of AI nowadays, I think the very first thing that people are going to think about is ChatGPT and the like. They're going to be thinking about talking to a computer and getting some important resources out. What I wanted to talk a little bit about today is the prior pieces of machine learning that existed before this that are just as important and still usable for our real world context. Because I think we're losing that a bit with everyone just focusing on the next steps of closer to artificial intelligence, real artificial intelligence, not just something that repeats information back to you that sourced from online resources. But what I'd like to start with first is a little bit of an example. So let's say, as small business owners, you might be familiar with this, you have an investor call coming up, and you need to summarize some important company figures. So simple example, I said, I need the summation of the given 100 sale profits ASAP. Back in the day, the very first thing you would do, you probably got this information from a spreadsheet, or if it was from someone else in the company, they sent it to you as a spreadsheet. But regardless, you can throw this into Excel, run a little formula, really simple one there, equal sum up all the numbers, and we get a result. And there you go. Your answer is done. I'm sure all of us can trust this as a valid solution, that this works, that that's the correct number. And I double checked, I typed them all into a calculator on my computer, and yep, I got the same one. So I verified myself that this is correct. But, I've been working a lot recently, and everyone's talking about AI, AI. You gotta be using AI. Well, how can I use this to augment this workflow instead? So what if I just take these 100 numbers and I give them to a large language model and say, add these up for me, right? This is going to be really cool. So I opened up DeepSeek specifically. I wrote myself a little prompt here, said, please sum up all the provided numbers for me. I heard people saying, you got to make sure it stays on the rails. So I said, do not hallucinate. I wanted to make sure the number was correct, so I asked it to compare your results to online resources. Of course, double check before providing the answer. And then I also wanted to make sure that I provide the answer in a single sentence. I didn't want a bunch of fluff. And then I pasted out all the numbers. So then I ran it, and that's not 63,430 or whatever the number was. That is much higher. And I personally tried to do a little bit of analysis. I was like, is this 4 times the amount that I initially put in? No. I truly don't know where it got this number from. So we have a problem here, right? I tried to use AI simply to augment my existing workflow, and I got a result that was not correct. If I just trusted it, I'd be providing incorrect information to whoever I was providing this information to. The issue is I'm diving into AI without fully understanding why I should be using it, and also ignoring the fact that there are existing tool sets that already exist that we use, such as Excel or Google Sheets, that are able to do this work for us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about AI versus automation to kind of distinguish these two features, when you should be using AI, and also then when you should be using automation. Now, I will note, I did cheat a little bit with this. The prompt I provided did give this result. It was incorrect. If I modified it by removing provide the answer in a single sentence, it manually calculated it all for me and gave me the correct answer. It also took me 3 or 5 minutes to actually end up seeing the answer I needed. So in the grand scheme of things, it cost me more time and effort to get the result out of DeepSeek than otherwise. Additionally, I was only doing really simple data analysis. I was just looking at the summation of all these numbers. If I wanted to do more complex things, then maybe this is going to be a better solution for me to take. But once again, I'm not trying to identify, here's all the amazing things you can do with AI, you must be using it. If we're trying to do things simply, we should be using the tools that exist already to achieve them rather than just throwing AI at a problem and getting invalid data. So a little bit just of the difference between AI versus automation. So AI, artificial intelligence, it learns to adapt to the problems that you give it. So you give it a whole lot of data, look at what Deshant just talked about for the last 35 minutes or so, and it's going to learn, see new trends, and help provide an answer for you. That process takes a lot of time and effort, especially if you're trying to train a custom model that uses custom data from a data set that you need to do data cleansing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to rehash, of course, what Deshant worked through. But some examples of this are things like chatbots, which use large language models, doing things like predictive analytics, so traffic estimations related to that, as well as generative AI, such as image and video generation. Automation is a little simpler, right? We all understand the concept of automating. It is following a set of rules to achieve an outcome. It's really helpful for speeding up repetitive tasks. When we know we need to do a certain set of tasks over and over again, where we just need to modify some small pieces of data, or we give it a set of data and get a specific output, that's when automation really benefits us. So this is for things like invoicing, emails, alerts, where maybe I want to know when this piece of equipment is reaching a temperature that's too high for operation, and I would get a notification on my phone that says, hey, this piece of equipment is now too hot, it can't work efficiently, you would need to get it serviced right away. So, but a little bit of a clear distinguish there is that automation is helpful for simple, repetitive tasks, where it's very rule-based. You have a set of rules that you're following as part of the process. AI is when you need learning, when you need understanding, we need personalization, decision-making. You need something extra to augment the data you're working with or the information you're working with. Automation can't do that for you, but AI can. AI is where you're providing information and you're looking at deeper trends in the data. And talking about AI, once again, as I mentioned earlier, it's always been about large language models, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, but there's still a whole other branch of AI that's just as valuable, just as important, and for a lot of small businesses, probably more beneficial than just throwing large language models at every problem we get. So some examples of when to use AI, of course, when we want to create new content, so that could be text, video, or images. We could look at higher dimension data analysis that we don't have the tools with our brains to immediately see. If you want to look at trends for shopping, you might throw a data set at it with a bunch of customers, information about those customers because you gain it through their online profiles, and what trends they're seeing in shopping. What are they buying? When are they buying it? How much are they buying? And then also we can look at things like recommendation engines. So be able to say, hey, this customer works at this store or shops at this store, and they frequently buy these sets of items. Well, a new item came out. This is probably something that that user is going to be involved or interested in a major way. So we can then recommend that, that item for that customer. But there's two real big, clear types of AI. So the first one is generative. This is the one we're all very familiar with. So this is creating new and original content. ChatGPT is a clear one for text and DALL-E for images. So we're creating something out of nothing, right? We didn't have something before, and now we do. We've inputted text, and we've gotten a response back to us from our computer, or we've inputted a prompt for an image, and now we have, you know, a zebra wearing a top hat or something, right? Then there's non-generative AI, or maybe the technical term is discriminative. So non-generative AI is much more focused on classifying data, analysis. You're looking for patterns, you're looking for recommendation systems. These are things where it's taking in a whole lot of numbers. There is no friendly interface with a robot telling you, hey, here's the information you need, and blah, 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 when you give it information. It is purely focused on numbers. It is purely focused on you providing information and it spitting out information in turn. And this is an area that I think a lot of us in this industry can really see benefits from implementing in their businesses. Sometimes though, of course, AI and automation can come hand in hand. So a clear example of this is a chatbot. Chatbots by itself, you know, not really helpful. It's just talking to a robot, and the robot talks back to you. But typically, when we interact with chatbots online, we're trying to gain something from it, right? We're trying to gain information out of it. And if you're working with a specific company that's maybe implemented a chatbot on their site, you're trying to gain specific information about that company from the chatbot. And taking it one step further, you might want to act on certain actions that the user has asked from the chatbot. So for example, you might want to use this for sending an email, making appointments where you, instead of getting a form that's saying, hey, what time do you want to schedule your appointment at? And there's a huge list of numbers, and you're like, this is too much for me right now. I can't think about this. I don't know when I'm going to be free. Having a conversation with the chatbot and saying what times are available around, 4 p.m. on this Thursday. And then it says, hey, I have availability at this time instead. Kind of like when you have a conversation with someone at a desk and you're trying to make an appointment with them rather than, just an online forum. So these chatbots are following, following rules to achieve this goal. You're still using a large language model to interpret and respond to the user messages. But underneath that, you're following a set of rules in order to achieve the goal that you want that user to do. So, scheduling an appointment. Because if you just let the large language model schedule appointments for you, you're going to end up with double bookings. You might end up at bookings at times that you're not available as like a practitioner or at in the middle of the night, for example. So, not very helpful to just use it and let it run on its own. So we can talk a little bit about some of the different ways AI can specifically be used in different industries. So for retail, we're looking at things like personalized recommendations, as discussed before. Looking at things like virtual assistants for in-store navigation. Maybe you're wanting to look for in a mall where a certain area is. Maybe I'm interested in men's clothing. It'd be able to suggest certain places to go to. Or it might suggest specific clothing items at a store for the user because you're looking for a men's jacket. Healthcare, as mentioned before, we could do things like appointment scheduling chatbots where you're able to see a list of time, you're able to communicate your challenge, identify whether this is a urgent care appointment or this is something that maybe it's a physical, so as we all know, sometimes when you want to book a physical, they say we have to book like 4 months out and then you finally get your physical done. It can also be used for things like diagnosing. In fact, maybe some of you have seen, but I believe it was in the news just a few days ago that some students at a university were able to use image detection for AI to determine if a patient had breast cancer 5 years before the signs typically show that doctors would be able to catch. So that's pretty impressive to know 5 years before there's any possible way of a doctor identifying whether you have breast cancer, to know that you may have it. That allows you to start prevention super early. You can get your treatment you need. It's going to be a lot less obtrusive because you need to probably do a less severe treatment plan. So it's going to be generally just better for the patient in that case. For other industries, things like food service, there's things like AI-driven inventory management. So you can look at things like trends of how users are or customers are buying food items from the restaurant and see, okay, well, we're finding on these days, customers really like the McRib. So we know that at this store at this time, we need to make sure that we have enough inventory because we sell out pretty quickly. It also could do things like predictive ordering at restaurants. I'm sure we've all done it where you've maybe done it through Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes. You place your order in the website, and then it suddenly spits out, hey, maybe you'd like a large Diet Coke or a chicken bites along with your pizza, right? A lot of this stuff can be powered using AI, and looking at the things that you're buying suggests an appropriate additional purchase that would augment your order. For professional services, this is things like doing things with documentation automation to be able to, say, summarize a meeting. That can be something that's very beneficial, or summarizing emails, as well as meeting scheduling optimization to identify maybe trends where, hey, I keep scheduling all my meetings from 9 to 1 every single day, which means I don't do anything but talk for 4 hours. And then for the last 3 hours or 4 hours of the day, I'm just exhausted. I get nothing done. I need a better strategy for this rather than, being slammed with meetings and then effectively checking out for the remainder of the day. It's not efficient. It's not efficient for me. It's not efficient for the company I work with or, the company I'm running. So as an example, just some approachable AI tools. I'm sure a lot of us have seen these already. We have seen chatbots, so ChatGPT and DeepSeek for doing things like handling FAQs and bookings in your company. AI-powered marketing tools. I know Canva's got a few AI-powered tools. Grammarly can be helpful for things like improving your copy, so that makes sure that you're optimizing what you're actually outputting as part of your marketing materials. Automation tools. So this is kind of a blend, as mentioned before, of AI and automation. Gumloop is a really interesting one where you can effectively connect a lot of your personal accounts, like your Gmail, and automatically on some schedule, could be daily, could be weekly, you're able to get effectively an AI summary of all the information you've received or all the email requests you've gotten, and then allows you to digest the morning rather than having to sift through 100 emails that you received because something went on fire last night and you need to identify a problem right away. There's also then for AI and customer insights, Google is introducing a lot of different updated tools in their platform to help improve the analytics you're working with if you're running your company online through Google. So maybe it's just to note some common mistakes that we see with AI. It's overcomplicating initial efforts. Remember the first example that I showed? That was me overcomplicating a problem that was actually pretty simple. All I needed was Excel. I just needed to add up a bunch of numbers. If I want to run some data analysis, maybe simple data analysis, it would have been pretty simple too. I could have just done using things like average functions in Excel and achieved that information that I wanted. It would have been quick, would have been easy. I'm not sending my information from my company off to some private server owned by Microsoft or whoever's running DeepSeek, right? In case there's fear of confidential. It's really simple. So by trying to introduce AI at that level, I'm overcomplicating things. I'm increasing the risk of issues. I am increasing the risk of losing that data, and it's also increasing the time it takes for me to do it. Because as I mentioned, I did get it right, but I had to wait 5 minutes for it to manually calculate and write out every single line of like 23 plus 7 equals 30. 30 plus 5 was 35. And it's not really beneficial for me. I think another common mistake with AI is being careful and not expecting it to replace human judgment entirely. Area for this is like for quotation systems, right? If you want to introduce a chatbot that's going to be able to provide a quote for some equipment you're working with at your company, you probably don't want ChatGPT to tell someone how much that piece of equipment is going to cost, especially if it's looking at something that costs tens of thousands of dollars. That just allows for a customer to then maybe work their magic with how they're asking questions, and suddenly you're providing them a piece of hardware for $500, and it should have cost them $50,000. So, of course, judgment is a very important thing. You always want to make sure you have human intervention when it comes to promises made by AI. I think a lot of us have also maybe seen, it was a few years, or maybe it was last year or the year before. It was Air Canada. There was a woman who wanted to cancel her flight due to a death in the family. So when she went to go contact Air Canada, she found their chatbot, asked it about its bereavement process, and it said, yeah, no problem, cancel your flight. Once you've had the funeral and gotten the death certificate, you submit it to Air Canada and we reimburse you for everything. So she said, perfect, I'll do that. Went through the process, canceled her flights, had the funeral, went back to Air Canada saying, here's all the information you needed, and they said, what's this? She said, well, it's the death certificate. You know, I've had death in the family, I need to cancel my flight. They said, we don't have that policy. She said, yeah, you do. I talked with the chatbot. In fact, I took pictures of it. It was your representative that told me that I could do this. And they said, well, no, we're not refunding you. Ended up going to the courts. Courts decided on in favor of the woman with the death in the family, saying if you're using AI and you're really using it to replace human judgment, you're letting it act as a representative of your company. And so Air Canada was then on the hook for that bill, and as soon as that happened also, that chatbot vanished. So it's something to be careful about, right? It's not something that we can just throw everything at and say, here's the new thing. We have a chatbot, it's doing all of our work for us, we can sit back and relax, and I'm gonna make a bunch of money. Well, in fact, it's gonna maybe cost you money, as seen in an example with Air Canada. So it's something to just be very careful of. Having rules to follow is going to allow you to prevent that. Having steps in place that allows for human intervention to ensure that information being provided is clear, is accurate, is always going to be beneficial. So maybe some best practices for starting with your company. Start with one problem. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't look at how can I overhaul my entire company using AI. Think about an area of your business that would benefit being improved with a better process that's digital now. But even then, before you even dive into it and go, okay, well, it's time for AI, think about the 3 different things we talked about today. So there's automation, right? Are you wanting to improve a rule-based process? That's an automation workflow. Are you wanting better emailing for notifications when someone schedules something for an on-site meeting, right? That's a case for automation. Are you wanting to identify new trends with user data or budget numbers or whatever data that your company has or is working with? That's a perfect case for discriminative AI, right? You're looking at training a model. This falls a lot with what Deshant was talking about, of having a big data set, cleansing it, preparing it, training a model, and looking at outcomes from that model. Finally then, it's the creation of new content. Are you wanting something that doesn't exist currently? Are you wanting new text? Are you wanting new video, images? That's a perfect case for generative AI. So it's good to keep these things in mind when you're starting out with trying to use AI in your company, because if you dive in too deep and hop right into generative AI when what you truly need is just a better process for data analysis, you're going to overcomplicate, you're going to make things probably potentially more expensive or get erroneous information. It's not going to be correct. So think about these things before you integrate AI. I mentioned these not as don't put in AI in your company at all, but things to think about, because going down one path can be, problematic for your future. So it's a matter of just thinking about what's the problem I'm working with and what's actually required for this solution. So from here, I would like to invite up 2 people. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about 2 projects that we've worked on at the center. And in the case of these 2 projects, one was where a project that had a AI bend, and it was a fitting bend. It was appropriate for why we were using AI. And then another project where the first thought was using AI, but ended up not being the correct option based off of the requirements we were working with, as well as the inputs. So I'd like to invite first Deshant, who will be acting as a little bit of a surrogate for one company, back up, and as well as Chris Sweeney from Swenka. Okay, well, thank you both for joining me. So maybe we could do a little bit of introduction. I know, Chris, you could probably go through yours first. Sure. Deshant, you want to hand the mic?
Hi there, my name is Chris Sweeney. I'm the Vice President for Swenco Limited. We are a manufacturing company in Waterloo, and we specialize in component manufacturing for the safety footwear industry. So safety toes, safety plates, things of that nature. And yeah, so that's, you want me to talk about the project too?
Maybe, Deshant, if you could just introduce the partner that we worked with, GoCPG.
Yeah, so stepping in for GoCPG, I was the project manager on the project. It's a interactive chatbot application helping organizations who are just stepping into the CPG space, so consumer product goods, specifically on the food side, on helping them walk through an entire business plan of what markets to go to, what are some of the good products in specific categories they would want to focus at.
Yeah. And then I guess, Chris, it would be good to introduce then the research project that we worked on together.
Sure. So yeah, for us, we got the idea actually from coming to this event last year and seeing some of the machine learning and AI tools that were being used in manufacturing. And my colleague Sal, who's at the back of the room there, actually had the idea of, well, what if we could simulate testing results for safety footwear components, in this particular case, safety toes. So, our problem was that we wanted to come out and develop a new safety toe that hadn't been seen in the market before. And to do that, we needed to build molds so that we could, get real prototypes off of these products. And then we needed to test them, realize they were failing, go back, revise our molds, trial and error type of thing. And this was costing us a lot of time, energy, and money to get these molds made and then do revisions on the molds to edit the prototype parts. So we came up with this idea of what if we could simulate these results based on different toe designs, material compositions, shapes, sizes, whatever, and get a pretty good predictive analysis of whether or not a specific toe design in a specific material would pass the standards.
Yeah. So where did you first see AI maybe being a part of that solution? When you first saw what you saw last year and when we started the project, where did you see AI fitting potentially?
Well, I mean, I'm not very well versed on AI, but I just thought, that maybe it could, if we could implement or tell it what the protocols were and the parameters were for the testing metrics that we needed to see, that maybe it would be able to suggest to us potential materials or designs to be able to use in order to pass these tests.
Yeah. Yeah, so then once we started the project, we were starting to do our first research into the problem, started looking at the data that was available to us, and one of the first things we did was think about the 3 different areas that you could implement a problem like this, right? So I talked about automation, discriminative AI, and generative AI. So generative AI, we're working with safety toes, we're looking with specific proprietary designs. It might be hard for a large language model to just say, hey, here's a design file, is this going to pass this test? I don't think that it's going to be appropriate and give us information within a specific error range that we'd be able to trust the result. Because in this industry, as one of our conversations we had, you were saying that there's 0 tolerance for errors. If you're testing a toe cap and you get 1 failure out of 100, that's disqualifying in itself, because that would be 1 shoe out of 100 sets of shoes that might actually result in an injury for someone. So because the field was working with such specific data, we can't have any error tolerance. And so a large language model where it's taking in this information and providing subjective input wasn't appropriate. We also additionally then looked at the other arm of AI, which was discriminative AI, and we started thinking about data sets. So one of the first things we did was start looking at what data is available to us. But we ran into a big problem, which is that in the industry, a lot of the information is maintained by experts, in terms of how a tow should be designed for success. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an industry where there's a lot of older people in the industry who have a lot of just industry knowledge that hasn't really made its way onto paper or into computers and stuff. There's a lot of people who just sort of know what tow models or what materials will work and what won't work. And again, there's just a lot across all these companies. There's a lot of organizational knowledge that's at risk of potentially vanishing when these people retire. And so that was a big thing for us as well, was to kind of get some kind of data set to be able to predict these things moving forward.
Yeah, so definitely, harkening back to what Deshant was talking about, without a data set that's available, that's really maintained by even any central company that works in the industry, there's no information that can be used to draw upon in order to gain us the analytics to determine if a simulation would be correct or not. Additionally, the issue was also working with a lot of novel tow designs, right? Working with new materials, new designs. How can that, improve our current or your current design process if we're using these new designs and materials? And we're even looking at more lack of data in that area, right? Because if everyone's making steel toe shoes, then everyone's making steel toe shoes. But what happens if you want to change that material? There's no information, there's no data to be able to gain immediately, because now you're working with a composite material, or et cetera. And so because a great issue where we don't have enough data that currently exists, really. And even then, we're working with new information, right? We're trying to gain new insights on data that hasn't been tested before, and that there's no way that we could use a discriminative model to predict that when we don't have any base to form our judgment off of. So then how did we end up taking the approach that we did? So we ended up not using discriminative AI, and we're not using generative AI. We ended up taking a more direct simulation approach, right?
Yeah, that's right. We took the data that we did have available to us across multiple different materials, and we just basically input those and started building out a model to be able to simulate these tests. The one benefit that we do have is that the tests themselves are all standardized, so that at least reduces one variable that we would have otherwise had.
Yeah, exactly. So looking for a solution for this, instead of taking an AI approach, as mentioned, there's a set of rules to follow for the standardized tests. They're standardized for a reason, right? They don't want people testing these toes in any which way, because you're not going to be able to trust whether it's actually going to meet the certifications for the specific region you're selling it in. So with that, we have a set of rules. We were able to take the opportunity then to look at more open source available tool sets that allow us to simulate the actual test process with pre-configured numbers that need to be modified on each successive run, and we were able to get a pretty amazing output, I would say. We were able to get a lot of information of the tests within very few millimeters of reality, which was more than range. Usually, the variance on a test could vary in centimeters in how much there was impact damage on a toe. But with our simulation, we were getting it within millimeters of real life. That's definitely a big promising result that was able to get us, closer to a working solution than just hoping that AI can generate a number that looks good enough, because we can't really understand what it's doing, right? AI is a black box in a lot of ways. You throw information at it, it tells you information back, and you kind of just have to take it at face value or do data analysis and validation to really understand why did it give you the output you gave. So then, Deshant, maybe we could talk a little bit about GoCPG and the tool sets we use for that and why it was appropriate. So the company, as you mentioned, was working with helping consumer product good companies, effectively being a virtual assistant to help a company using the platform to help improve their business. And definitely this area was more fitting for generative AI, right?
So a good advantage there, like in the last few years, everybody has seen the emergence of conversational AIs, right? So tools like ChatGPT and a bunch of others have always been pushing the boundaries of how a conversation can go. Um, the advantage with ChatGPT is comes with its own data set where it can make decisions based on the information it already has. There are a bunch of other tools as well. Meta or Facebook has something called Llama that is basically just a conversational system. So it's just a large language model. You feed your proprietary information in it, and then it will give you outputs in a conversational form. So in many cases, what would happen when you're trying to start a conversation is, one, it makes the information or the data at the back end a lot less intimidating, where if I am able to, in many cases, even when I am asking questions to ChatGPT, there might be times where I'm like, this is easy to read, but it's a little difficult to understand, and I often ask it to dumb it down to my level. So it just makes things easier for people to understand. A big advantage of having something that's a generative AI system is you can take a large amount of data in the back end, a large volume, well-structured data, and then make it like a conversation. So even if now anybody wants to try it, you can open ChatGPT, ask it a really complicated question, get a response from it, and then ask it again to, can you explain this to me like I'm a toddler? And it will. It certainly will. So having generative and a large language model attached to any of your software for something that requires a conversation to happen make things a lot easier. So the other advantage that having generative AI and conversational AI would also give you is the ability to ask follow-up questions. So let's say, for example, in this project, if we were to feed information as like, hey, I am starting a new starting a new beverage. This is a health-focused, a health-driven beverage that we want to sell in a specific area. Let's say it suggests that you can sell it, the place where it would sell it the most is Whole Foods. And then it's like, okay, Whole Foods is a national brand. Is there specific stores or specific areas or specific zip codes that you want to ask us where this food will do better, right? So you can ask, having a conversational, having a generative AI chatbot or a tool that you are building, what it lets people do is ask follow-up questions. Like from my time in manufacturing, we used to draw something which is like a 5 wires or like an Ishikawa diagram, where you keep asking more questions like, why did you do this, and why this, and why this, and by the time you get to your 5th why is when you actually get the answer that you were looking for. So having a conversational chatbot and having a generative side to it, you can ask it to dig deeper and simplify more things or ask for more data, and ask for data to be presented that you can understand it like it is being a conversation or it's actual information that you can consume. So with GoCPG, where the big advantage that for them that it came in, where they were using multiple different data sources, and having these multiple different data sources being compiled and having turned into a conversation, the best way to approach this was using a sort of generative AI. So they were not using generative AI to make informed decision based on specific numerical values. I mean, just using numerical values, but they were also using that information and in addition to a large language model, where it becomes like an expert that you are hiring, right? So it becomes an SME for you. You ask SME the questions, it's going to give you responses not based on a personal bias, but totally dependent on what data it has in the back end.
Yeah, it was a really interesting project to work on, and the process of getting information in a chatbot format also was an interesting challenge, because typically with chatbots, it's, you have a computer effectively that has all its information, and as a user, you're trying to gain information out of it. But there was also the data gathering process, as mentioned. We're working with companies that needed to say, Where are you currently selling your product? How much are you selling it for? What regions are you working with? To be able to use a chatbot to gain that information from the user and effectively provide a conversation was a really interesting approach, and we were able to develop effectively a kind of a working version of the application, which allows for an onboarding of providing all the information that you had about your company and providing it with a chatbot, and it's able to then run an analysis, provide a set of insights, and effectively actionable next steps for your company. Evaluating it, saying, how are you doing in certain areas? Are you selling your product for a good price based off of this, the domain you're working in? Is your marketing strategy correct? Because you said, you're not using Instagram and you're a health food conscious company. That's probably a big hit against you in terms of how you're doing in terms of marketing. Yeah, so I want to thank you both for joining me up here. I think we're just about out of time, so we need to move on. So thank you so much for you two. And I don't think we have time for questions, probably not. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Any questions from anyone in the crowd about using AI versus automation, maybe any specific problems that you're thinking about facing, and what tool sets would be maybe most valuable for you to start looking into first? That's a really good question. We usually do a lot of chatbot manual implementation ourselves. Deshaun, do you have any specific software in mind for implementing a chatbot quickly?
So again, it depends, right? If you have your unique data set, I would highly recommend using something like Llama, which is Facebook's chatbot. The idea there is it would only use information that you're feeding it. You can integrate OpenAI, so like you can have a tool that just embeds or integrates ChatGPT into what you are trying to do, but that will require a lot of prompt engineering. That's a completely different rabbit hole that I think if we start talking about that will take 2 more hours. So you are welcome to come over and chat about that as well if you're interested in that. So if you want it siloed, use Llama. If you wanted to pick information from all over the globe, large language models from OpenAI, Claude, there are tons. There are tons.
Okay. One is, yeah, quick question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, generally speaking, the desires of the footwear manufacturers are always thinner and lighter footwear. That is the push of the industry and has been for years. So the and in terms of protective plates, puncture-resistant plates, there's already been a lot more development in that area for unique materials and whatnot. So we focused on the toe just simply because there's a lot of weight in a steel toe. And if we could look into different materials to get, to a point where we had a lighter toe around the same thickness or even thinner than steel, that we would be in a good spot. Well, we're still working on the project now. We're about halfway through it at this point. But it will is the answer. Again, there's a lot more push to move away from metals in safety footwear, and so a lot of the industry currently is trending towards composites or plastics, and that's where our focus is at this moment.
Yeah, as part of the project, I'll say the first half was focusing on understanding the pipeline of can we even get a reliable simulation result out of the tool sets that we're using, and we confirmed yes, thankfully. And so really the second part of this project is really focused on what we were talking about for automation, which is, okay, well now we have a pipeline, but it uses a bunch of different tools. It's not really helpful for someone who's not technical to be able to use this easily. So by developing effectively an application surrounding it, we're able to make it a lot easier for someone to use the application, provide the information they need based off of the rules they have, and understand the result toe. This software would likely be used internally just at Swenco, not used for customers, because the idea is that Swenco will be using it to evaluate whether you would be approaching with a new, or moving forward with a new design or material based off of a customer's requirements. But you making sure it's usable internally is effectively the next process, and ensuring everything works together nicely, supports expansion of different materials and whatnot. There's also the reality of, well, now if we have a way of simulating these tests and it's really accurate, you can start collecting a data set based off of that, right? Where you can say, well, now we know what works because we've run this test, we got this result. If you keep running tests and tests and tests, we're now forming the basis of a data set that could be used for training a machine learning model for quicker turnaround. Because right now the process isn't too long, but it does take some time to run the simulation. But a machine learning model where you just throw at it a few sets of figures and get an output right away would be, ideal. To be able to know right away, is this design going to work? If I need to change it, you can make some changes, know right away whether it works. So it's knocked down the processing time a whole lot, and hopefully we knock it down even further. Okay, thank you so much.